Can we admit that we're all transfixed by that sick little soap opera trial in Exeter, New Hampshire? Call it Peyton Place meets Lord of the Flies, a rustic replay of the Chuck and Carol Stewart case.
Everyone was screaming, how come no one's doing anything? And a policeman came down the stairs and he said, because he's dead.
The story of Pamela and Greg Smart is about puppy love and cold-blooded murder in what used to be quaint Derry, New Hampshire, just down the road from the poet Robert Frost's old farm. Sex with a 15-year-old set the stage. Today, Pamela Smart recounted her seduction of the confessed triggerman, Bill Flynn.
Well, I didn't set out to have an affair with him, but I did.
Props were suggested by the kinky video movie 9½ Weeks.
You make love to him?
Yes.
Did you do the thing with the ice cubes?
No. I think he's having a problem remembering where reality began and the movie stopped.
Bill Flynn said he was hooked, but that it was she who bought the bullets and hatched the plot that killed her husband.
Do you want this jury to understand that Bill Flynn decided to kill your husband because you broke up with him?
I want this jury to understand the truth.
Is that what you're claiming the truth is?
I don't know why Bill Flynn killed Greg. I can just come in here and give my testimony.
So even as you sit here today, you still have no idea why he may have done this. Is that it?
I didn't say I had no idea, but I don't know specifically.
Well, I'm asking you, what do you think? Why do you think he did this?
Probably because he thought we could be together.
The Smart trial is the hottest show in Exeter. So hot you have to have a ticket to get in. Reporter Marcus Jones was there today to catch a glimpse of the ticket seekers and to ask them why they travel for miles to see and hear the trial up close.
Scene has become commonplace.
Will you give me a number for my girlfriend? She couldn't leave till 1:15.
Guys, try everything.
Monday through Friday, groupies of the Pamela Smart trial camp out for hours just to get one of the 30 tickets reserved for public seating inside the courtroom.
What time did you get here today?
1:30 this morning.
1:30. Why?
Wanted to get a front row seat, I guess.
It's just the case is so bizarre that I just can't believe the whole thing, so I thought it would be interesting to come and see exactly what is transpiring.
You mean just watching it on television was not enough?
It was not enough, although when we came Friday, I ended up watching it on television in the other room there because the court was filled.
Yeah.
Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please take a seat.
Those arriving too late for the reserved seating, which today was any time after 4:30 a.m., are still allowed to watch the proceedings on a 13-inch television monitor across from the courtroom. That's where Patricia Nicholson and 3 of her friends spent the morning, listening to the testimony of Pamela Smart.
When you were growing up, I mean, was this kind of thing ever, did it ever go on, teachers involved with students?
No, I've never heard of it. Yeah, no, not way back then.
If this story were a made-for-TV movie, and it surely will be, you might not believe it.
The trial of Pamela Smart, accused of plotting the murder of her husband last year with a group of teenage boys, isn't just the talk of the town anymore. It's the talk of the nation, the stuff of movies and soap operas, except that in New Hampshire, where the trial is broadcast live, there is nothing on the air these days quite as steamy.
You know what I think is healthy about this trial, and I mean this sincerely. Court trials have always been a mystery to the general public. The average guy doesn't know what happens in a courtroom during a murder trial. Well, now they do. They've been watching it on television for 2 weeks. And I think people are going to be more adept at being on the jury now. I think they're going to be more willing to go into court and serve as jurors. I think it helps everybody if you understand what's going on.
Reporter Bill Spencer was the first person to interview Smart after the murder. He's been covering and uncovering the sordid details of the case ever since.
I hear there's talk of a movie. I mean, is there going to be someone playing you possibly? Are you at all involved in the possible dealings with that?
I understand there's going to be a couple of different movies, and I understand there will be a character that will play me. I don't know who that would be.
Are you going to give them a point of view in one of these?
Point of view?
Well, I mean, might one of these movies come from your point of view?
Oh, I don't believe so. I possibly will be a contributor to these movies, a consultant.
No, I didn't set out to have an affair with him, but I did. And in February, I believe it was February 27th or something, it was during February vacation also, while I was over at his house, we were working on the video, we were in his room, and he kissed me. Excuse me?
Fight him off?
No.
What happened?
He kissed me and then I went home.
Watching the Smart trial is perhaps the most popular spectator sport going in the Granite State. As each new bit of evidence is produced, the onlookers react like a jury at large, passing judgment on the trial's key players.
It's pretty difficult. I can honestly say that I wouldn't want to be in the jury's position right now. It would be a hard decision. I mean, there's an awful lot of evidence against her, but you never know what's going to happen.
I think the outcome should be that they go to jail for the maximum sentence. Pamela Smart should, I think, go with them, too.
I have a daughter about her age, and I try to put my daughter in her place. And I have compassion, regardless if she's guilty or not. It's unfortunate.
In the circus atmosphere that surrounds a sensational murder trial, it's easy to forget the reality of what's going on. The reality that a young man is dead, that his family still grieves for him, that 3 other young men and a woman will likely go to jail for a very long time, that their lives will be ruined, and that all of this will be documented at some point in a movie of the week. It's enough to make you wonder at times just what it's all about. Justice or just entertainment? For the 10 o'clock news, I'm Marcus Jones.
While Pamela Smart was the big draw today, the case against her was built on the testimony of several teenagers. 3 high school students face stiff sentences for their role in Greg Smart's murder. Meg Valancourt reports tonight on the changing attitudes and new laws that force young people to pay the price.
I cocked the hammer back and pointed the gun at his head.
Bill Flynn was 16 when he murdered Greg Smart. He took the stand to testify about the shooting on his 17th birthday.
100 years, it seemed like. And, I said, God forgive me.
After you said, God forgive me, what happened?
I pulled the trigger.
I think when they committed an adult crime, they should be tried as an adult.
Like when murder's involved, right? When there's a serious crime, I think they should be tried as adults.
Plus, it was first degree. I mean, they knew what they were doing. It wasn't like they did it by accident or anything.
If you're looking for a jury of Flynn's peers, this is it. These South Boston sophomores are the same age Flynn was when he began his affair with Pamela Smart. They're 15.
Anyways, because they know the difference between right and wrong. They could have walked away from it, but they didn't. They just wanted to do it.
What the kids say is that, you know, they were only 15, 16 years old. They didn't know better. Do you believe that?
No, you know it.
They know between right and wrong. Yeah, you should know better by now.
How old do you think you know the difference? How old?
I think 12, 13.
I think, yeah. You know, ever since you were little, you know not to kill people. I mean, that was one thing you always knew.
Of course, it's not Flynn who's on trial in New Hampshire, but he's confessed he's the one who pulled the trigger. He claims he was seduced into killing by his self-esteem counselor, Pamela Smart.
Do you believe the kids?
No, actually, I kind of find it hard. I think they're just covering it up like they need like a reason, so.
Flynn and his 2 accomplices are all teenagers, yet in New Hampshire court they're being treated as adults.
In New Hampshire, there is no lower age limit in terms of binding a juvenile over to the adult system.
Here in Massachusetts, there are 1,900 young offenders in the Department of Youth Services. Last year, 31 of them were charged with murder.
There are a number of factors that the judge must look at in Massachusetts. They look at the seriousness of the offense. They look at if there's any remorse. They look at previous efforts to rehabilitate the juvenile in the juvenile system in Massachusetts. And in weighing these conditions, they make the determination of whether or not this juvenile indeed can be rehabilitated. And if that's the case, then the juvenile's tried as a juvenile. If not, say as in the very celebrated case of Rod Matthews a few years ago, the Commonwealth, maybe because of the premeditated nature of that particular offense, was able to prove that the juvenile could not be rehabilitated, and so the juvenile case was closed, and he was tried as an adult and sentenced as an adult.
As Commissioner of DYS, Edward Loughran helped champion law changes that make it more difficult for Massachusetts teenagers to get away with murder. Since last December, juveniles charged with murder must prove that they are suited to juvenile court proceedings. Otherwise, it's presumed they'll be transferred to adult court.
Well, that's the determination that the court has to make. If the court feels that the issue of punishment and responsibility clearly outweighs the issue of rehabilitation, then it's clear that the court could bind the kid over and the person would be tried as an adult. So, but that's a decision that's made up front rather than later on.
In addition, the new law allows DYS to extend the detention of teenage murderers from 18 until they're 21 in Massachusetts. But in New Hampshire, Flynn and his friends are in adult court proceedings. They testified against Smart in exchange for lighter sentences. The 3 teens are charged with second-degree murder, which means that unlike first-degree murderers, someday they'll be eligible for parole. They'll be sentenced after Smart's trial and face a minimum of 18 to 28 years in prison.
If it happened to you, a friend of yours came and said he was thinking about committing a pretty serious crime, what would you do?
It depends on what the crime was.
I try and talk them out of it, get someone else into it, try and talk them out of it too, because I don't think that's right. People shouldn't be doing that.
For the 10 o'clock news, I'm Meg Valancourt.
Our guest, Alan Dershowitz, has come to the legal rescue of Klaus von Bülow, Leona Helmsley, Jim Baker, among other desperate defendants. Can you imagine a route to freedom for Pamela Smart?
It's not going to be easy, but this is a case where...
Has she called yet?
No, okay. Where everything turns on matters of degree. Now, it's obvious that the kid killed because he believed that she wanted the man dead. But that's not enough for conviction. There has to be very specific directions by Pamela to the young man to kill. And if she can persuade a jury or cast some doubt in their minds as to whether maybe he didn't act on his own on the basis of some subtle cues she may have given, but maybe she misunderstood and misinterpreted, there's a possible route out, particularly when you combine that with the fact that these kids have been given deals and the actual killer has been given a plea bargain, and the defense attorney can, I think, and did a fairly effective job in trying to show how he would have in his interest to twist the truth and make it come out black and white where it may be a little grayer.
But hasn't she undermined that first course of your defense by saying, no, we never discussed it. She never imagined that Bill Flynn could have done this?
Well, no, I think it's consistent for her to say we never discussed it, although the tape suggests something maybe a little bit different. We never discussed it, although we discussed the fact that, you know, I loved him, I wanted to be with you, he was a barrier to me being with you, I couldn't love 2 people at the same time. She can take the position that we never had a specific discussion about killing, and yet suggests that there were discussions which could have led him as an impressionable young man to honestly believe that she wanted him dead, but wrongly in his view.
But she's already suggested it never occurred to her until after he was arrested that she might even have a lawyer. She'd have to backtrack a bit.
Well, and the tape hurts her on that too, because on the tape she does seem to say that she knew it was going to happen in advance. She now says she was playing games. That was the weakest part of her otherwise fairly credible testimony. She seems quite persuasive. Now, the prosecutor, of course, can turn that against her. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, if this woman has persuaded you, you can imagine how much more persuasive she would have been to this young, impressionable boy.
About the deal with the boy and his friends who admitted killing her husband, that rankles with a lot of people, and not to defend her, but that the boys could be getting away with murder. Was there another way to prosecute the case without giving them so good a deal?
There almost never is when you have crimes of this kind or alleged crimes of this kind. You almost always have to make a deal, and you're going to make a deal with the devil. When you go to prosecute the devil, you go to hell, as the prosecutor always says, and you need to get your witnesses there. And so I think, although the defense attorney always has a good time challenging the credibility of witnesses who deals are made with, in the end, juries, if there's corroboration, and there is corroboration here through the tape, juries tend to give credence to those kinds of witnesses.
Pamela Smart has had a very bad press in this trial, and she's had a lot of hard knocks outside the courtroom, especially from her dead husband's parents. Mm-hmm. I'm sure that the TV jury out there is ready to hang her. Does that become an issue in the trial? Could it become an issue?
Oh, of course. juries live in the real world, particularly when they're not sequestered. And today the real world is that relatives of victims try to get the ear of the media. They try to win the case both in the court of public opinion and in the courtroom. Victims have become much more important parts of the criminal justice system. In this case, the victim is dead, but the victim's family. And a defense attorney has a very difficult time in trying to figure out how to deal with it. You can't attack the victim's family. They're, after all, grieving and tragic figures. On the other hand, you can't ignore them. You can't allow them to win the case in the court of public opinion. So it's a very difficult role the defense attorney has to play.
How are they playing it? How is this one playing it? How are the prosecutors playing it?
Well, the prosecutors are very lucky in a case like this. They don't have to say a word. They have the family doing the job for them. By the way, that happened in the Von Bulow case too, when Sonny Von Bulow's family hired their own lawyer and their own public relations people to make the case for the prosecutor. It puts the defense attorney in a very awkward situation. In this case, defense attorney doesn't seem to be playing to the media. Maybe he feels that he can do it in the courtroom, particularly since, after all, the case is being televised. So the line, the sharp line between what goes on inside the courtroom and outside the courtroom is becoming blurred a little bit.
But could there be grounds for appeal there on the basis of the coverage?
It's really an issue of last resort. You almost never win when you have to rely on media coverage. There are cases, Sam Shepard a long time ago, which was one on that ground. But today I think the courts have become much more accustomed to media attention, and it's a much more difficult issue to win on appeal.
What about the coverage here and the skyrocketing ratings for the whole story? When the case was made for cameras in the courtroom, in effect TV coverage of trials like this, did anybody suppose that it was going to have this kind of World Series excitement and mass entertainment possibility?
Yes, I think it was anticipated, and it's not so terrible. After all, a case like this does bring people into the courtroom, and people tend not to only watch part of it.
As if that's a good thing.
I think it's a good thing. I think courts are too important to be left to judges and lawyers, and the system of justice belongs to all of us. There is always the potential of a circus atmosphere, but the judge seems to be controlling it quite well in this case. And the alternative, it seems to me, is the system which today exists in England and other parts of the world, where the media can't effectively cover important trials, and there's a real downside to that approach as well.
Meaning,
for example, a case like Watergate in this country could not have been effectively covered in England because they have rules which prohibit the press from covering an ongoing investigation the way Woodward and Bernstein covered this investigation. You know, the Birmingham 6 case, I think, is more likely to have happened in a place like England than in a place like here. Here, I think there would have been constant pressure through the media to reopen that case, and I think the courts would have been susceptible to that pressure. In the end, the courts were susceptible there as well, too, but it took, tragically, 16 years.
This is not exactly a legal question, but why do we find this case interesting?
Well, it has everything. After all, you have a teacher. You send your kids to school, and you don't expect a teacher to seduce a 15-year-old kid. And then there's the murder and the sex. It's the perfect case for
tawdry little
attention.
small-town triangle. I mean,
well, it's more than that. It's a metaphor for so much of America. You know, if Shakespeare were writing today, he wouldn't be writing about Danish kings. He'd be writing about Bernard Goetz in the New York subways, and he'd be writing about crimes of this kind. Trials have a fascination, and Americans have been particularly fascinated by trials since the beginning of our history. Tocqueville, 150 years ago, talked about how every issue in America somehow gets into the courts. And they're not only the big issues of abortion and capital punishment, but they're the everyday passions of a rural place like New Hampshire.
Thank you, Alan Dershowitz.